Hi, my name is Iannielli, and I am a male to female transgender girl. And I want to talk about a couple of things uh, that my friends or people in general ask me uh, since they realize that I am transgender. And I'm sure a lot of people are curious as to what goes on for a transgender individual. I will gladly answer questions raised as long as they're uh, tolerable type of questions and not mean-spirited. One question that is often asked is, why would I transition so late in my life? I only started my transition 3 years ago, and I was 51 years old when I began my transition from male to female. So I started pretty late in my life, and the reason why I transitioned late was many reasons. Actually, growing up, I wanted to transition early. The earliest recollection that I had of wanting to transition was at the age of 16, at the onset of my puberty. I didn't want to go through male puberty, but I was afraid to tell my parents because they both struggled with mental illness, and my mom was in the hospital several times during my childhood, so I didn't want to weigh my burden on her or my dad, who also had his share of health concerns. So I kept it internal to hide it, and the only way I could deal with it was cross-dressing. That helped me a lot. I cross-dressed basically all my life, and I knew that I was a girl in my heart since the age of 3. So wanting to transition at age 16 made sense to me, even though I knew that it wasn't going to happen. Then I wanted to transition in my early 20s, but I was still living at home, and for the same reasons I couldn't tell my parents. My mom passed when I was 29. She was going to be 50, and her depression robbed her of her life. So I never did get to share my transgender struggles with my mom, and I was still living at home with my dad. I actually lived with my dad to provide him company and to help me save money. My dad didn't ask me for money to live there. He was a wonderful father, and I loved him. I miss both my parents, but I couldn't tell my dad. So I just kept my transgender feelings to myself. And at the age of 33, I started seeing a therapist, which helped. And actually, over time, she discouraged me from wanting to transition and encouraged me to meet a girl who she actually arranged the date with me, and we hit it off and eventually married, and we had a son. So my plans of transitioning really, as much as I wanted to, kind of got put off, and I didn't focus on that. I always desired to transition, but I just couldn't. It wasn't the right time for me. And then we were blessed with a wonderful child, so I didn't think about transitioning. I was delighted being married and having a son. And then my son was diagnosed with autism, and that took a toll on my wife and I. And we wanted to do everything in our power to help him. So my gender struggles kind of took a back seat to everything, though it was still in my mind. But I wanted to be the dad that I knew I was supposed to be, and the husband that I knew I should be. So I lived that male role, which I didn't really identify with comfortably, but I knew in my heart I loved my wife and my son. And when we were informed of our son's autism, it was very hard and emotionally very draining and very difficult. So we put all our efforts into helping our son, and over the years he struggled, but he was enrolled in special programs, and when he was of school age, he was given the necessary attention that he deserved, and he was in very small classes with one-on-one attention. So life was going pretty well. I was working hard, and I was devoted to my wife and to my son, but I was still cross-dressing in secret. I still had those feelings of wanting to transition that I couldn't break away from. And all throughout my son's childhood, my dad was involved, and my wife and I and our son were living on our own now after staying with my dad for a year to get on our feet. My dad helped us out. We first lived in an apartment, and then I spent my life savings on our house, our first and so far only house to date. And my dad would come over and visit our son Maddie and spend hours with him, and they would have great joy, great fun together. But sadly, my dad took his life due to severe depression, and he battled with alcoholism, and my son was only 10, so I was devastated, and I had to kind of figure out how to explain what happened to Pop to my son, which was very emotional and very difficult. And he didn't accept what I told him. So we let him believe what he wanted to believe. due to the stress of losing my dad, my cross-dressing persisted, and I was finding myself needing to have a release and venture outdoors to express my femininity, but I did it all in secret, and I hid it from my family. Then one of my best friends consoled me during my dad's tragic suicide, and he was very helpful, and I was very lucky to have him as a friend to talk to me and help me cope. But 2 years later, he died in his sleep, and he was only 40. It was very devastating, very tragic. And when I went to his wake, it really affected me in so many ways. And when I reached out to his wife and baby daughter to console them, it seemed that I needed consoling as well. And I was so upset about losing my friend so young. He was very young, only 40. I had to go back into therapy. Between my dad's suicide and my best friend's death, I needed help. So I went for therapy once a week, and after going, I had an awakening. I knew what I had to do. I had to transition. I was about 50 at the time, near 51, and it was hard for me when I hit 50. And I knew throughout the years wanting to transition, but never being able to. And I knew I was getting older, so I knew deep down in my heart what I had to do, and that's why I decided to transition. I was with my therapist, then I found Callan Wood, thankfully, and my doctor, who I love, who put me on hormones after meeting with her 3 months earlier, explaining to her my situation. So she put me on estradiol and spironolactone, which is what I'm taking now for a little over 2.5 years now, and I'm very happy being on the hormones, and it has helped me tremendously in my transition from male to female. The hardest part was telling my wife and son and being sensitive to their needs. But over time, both my wife and son became used to that, and now my son is my biggest supporter. My wife is still trying to grasp it, but she accepts me, and I dress as a woman full time now for the past 3 years, since I was 51 and I started my transitional journey. I've been living and dressing as a woman full time 24/7 since age 51, and I'm now 54. And I'm very much happier living as a woman, a transgender woman. So in answer to your question or my friend's questions as to why I transitioned later in life and felt the need to, it's very simple, because I had no choice. I had to transition. And the reason I transitioned late was due to many circumstances which I've explained. Another question that my friends ask me, and I guess people in general are curious about, is do I wish to have gender reassignment surgery, also known as sex reassignment surgery, also known as sex change operation? And the answer is yes. I do want the surgery. I do want to have the feeling of being a full woman. I know in my heart I am a woman, but I still have a male body. And no matter how many hormones I take, that won't change. And I desperately want to feel feminine and be happy as a woman and live as female as I can possibly be. The surgery will ultimately give me the sensation that a woman has with her vagina. I'm not really looking for relationships. I'm married and I hope to still be married. But I want to have the surgery for myself, nobody else. I've wanted to have the surgery since I was 16, and I know who I would love to have perform my surgery, Dr. Marcy Bowers out in California. If I could have her do my surgery, I would be thrilled. She's one of the best in the field, and I respect her tremendously. And I'm even friends with her on Facebook, which is pretty cool. So yes, in answer to the question, I definitely wish to have the surgery. Another question that my friends ask me is why do I have this overwhelming need to be a girl, a woman, a transgender woman? Why couldn't I just stay as the male that I was born as? They don't seem to realize what it's like to struggle with your gender. I have had very intense emotional pain from my gender dysphoria, and I have struggled a lot, and it has been very emotionally draining for me, very painful, and I've cried many times as a result, but there's nothing I can do. I believe in my heart that I was supposed to be a girl. I was born in the wrong body. Though I have had many happy moments, especially with the marriage of my wife and the birth of our son, I still struggle with my body. And being a male, I never felt comfortable. I wasn't happy, and I always knew that I should have been born a female, but through some twist of fate, I was born with a female mind and a male body, which didn't add up for me, and it made me very sad and withdrawn I struggled with my shyness all my life, and it was very painful. I had nobody to talk to about it. I never saw a therapist or a psychiatrist until my early to mid-30s. That's how long I had to be secretive about my struggle, and it really affected me. I attempted suicide on 3 occasions, and they were all stemming from my gender dysphoria and severe depression. Once was during my teenage years when I tried to overdose on sleeping pills. Then when I was in my early 30s, I tried to do the same thing actually, overdose on sleeping pills. And then earlier in December, not that long ago, I tried to overdose on aspirin and sleeping pills, but I just landed in the hospital. I spent 2 weeks there. I've been in the hospital many times for my severe depression and my suicidal ideation. It seems I scare third-party individuals when I'm in conversation with them over the telephone, and they call 911, and then I wind up in the hospital or being evaluated. I must have been in the hospital, 4 different hospitals on different occasions, approximately a dozen times. So I've been struggling, and that's why my psychiatrist and therapist won't consent to my having gender reassignment surgery at this time. I'm hoping that I will get over this severe depression and effectively deal with my gender dysphoria, so eventually, not too long into the distant future, my psychiatrist and my therapist will provide me with the letters of consent that I need for Dr. Marcy Bauer's office that will allow me to have the gender reassignment surgery. I am really desperate for the surgery, and I know that I will be much more happier as a result of the surgery. So that's why I have to listen to my heart, and that's why I need to become female, because I am female. I've always known that, and that will never change. I will always battle with my gender dysphoria. I'm curious how the surgery will affect my gender dysphoria. I assume, based on watching other trans women's videos on YouTube, that it will most definitely make a significant improvement in my gender dysphoria, because now my body will approximate and be in sync with my mind, since I will effectively have a female body with the surgery. I won't be able to give birth, obviously. I won't have a reproductive system, but I will have a vagina that will be fully functional if I decide eventually, if my wife were to leave me, to have relationships with men. For me now, that's not in my picture, and I don't see it anytime soon, and it all hinges anyway on my surgery and my wife leaving me. So at this time, I am still living as a transgender woman, and I am still married, and I am very happy with my situation as a woman, trans woman, though I still do hope to have the surgery. And my biggest concern is my son. I want to have a lifelong relationship with my son, whether I have the surgery or not. My son is the most important aspect of my life. I can live without the surgery, but I can't live without my son. My son gives me a sense of purpose, and I need to have him in my life. I love my son with all my heart and soul, and he's what makes me smile and feel happy. Surgery will make me happy, but my son is my life, and he always will be. And I want him to do well in his life and find his happiness. I know he has his own struggles with autism, like I do with my gender dysphoria, so we have a lot in common. I've struggled with intense shyness. I struggle with a low self-esteem, though I've accomplished many things. I've even studied in college, mechanical engineering. I was very interested in technical things and understanding the workings of them. Plus, my dad was a very proud iron worker, and I was very proud of my dad. And my mom always reinforced education, and she was who was my biggest supporter in learning mathematics. She was always by my side helping me with my math work, my math assignments. So I owe a lot to my parents, both of them. I just wonder if I was able to tell them how they would have reacted, and I believe in my heart that they still would have accepted and loved me for who I am. But if I transitioned earlier, I wouldn't have had my beautiful son and wife in my life. So I feel blessed that I am transitioning later because of my lovely wife and son being in my life. They are what make me feel truly happy inside. I don't want to be lonely. I want to be a happy, young, transgender woman, even in my early to mid 50s. I still look rather young for my age, and I think a lot of it is attributed to the female